Alrighty, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining Beyond the PhD today. We're super excited to welcome Dr. Kirby Madden-Hennessey, who is a research scientist at Enrich Biosystems. So Kirby and I met during my first lab rotation in the Biomedical Science PhD program at UConn and have been really close ever since. So in addition to being a very good friend, Kirby is also a super talented scientist, and I love hearing about all the cool things that she gets to do at work and figured that our Beyond the PhD audience would also enjoy hearing about it. Kirby is okay with getting interrupted for questions throughout, so feel free to raise your hand or put questions in the chat and I will moderate to make sure we get as many questions answered as possible. So without further ado, Kirby, you can go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Sure. Let's see. All right. Everyone can see? You can see Rachel? It's not in the presenter yet. Hold on, let me put in. Good?
Yep, you're good.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the invite, Rachel. I'm happy to come back and do a presentation for you guys. I attended a bunch of your guys's talks when I was there because I knew I didn't want to go back into academia. I want to go more into the industry. So it's nice to come back around and do a presentation for you guys. All right. So as Rachel said, please feel free to interrupt me as often as you would like with questions. I'm pretty much informal. I'm very open to any question, whether you think it could be, like, I know some people like salary, ask me, I don't care. I will tell you straight up. Anything, I'm open to it. So don't be afraid to ask questions. All right, so I figured I'd start just by introducing myself. So I was born and raised in Connecticut. I'm originally from Bristol, so not too far from Farmington, where I did my PhD. I'm a huge sports fan, and so one of the things that I found as a release during my PhD is getting involved in a lot of other things besides science. It also opens up other doors. So some of my parents that are on my basketball team are in the science industry, I found out. So they're one way of networking, kind of. But these are two of my teams. So currently I'm coaching these guys. We won the championship last year. So this is just a picture after our championship game. And then this is the team, it's a high school team in this picture that I coach in the spring. So it's a lot of fun coaching those guys. And also was one of the things that I think actually kind of helped me get more of a leadership role at the current company I'm at. Some other fun facts, I run an Airbnb in Old Saybrook. I love doing pottery on my free time. Rachel actually did it with me for a few sessions in Southington. So anybody who likes art, there's pottery course in Southington. I love going hiking. As a lot of you guys know, in New England, it's great for hiking. And I'm a big book nerd, love reading. Sometimes not necessarily reading science papers, but reading books in general. And I don't know if you guys still have it, but we used to have a book club at UConn Health, or if you're at a different school. We used to have a book club that we used to do, which was a lot of fun. All right. So I don't know if there's undergrads on this talk, or if it's mostly just grads and postdocs, but I figured I would start basically right when I graduated from Eastern Connecticut State University, where I got my bachelor's in biochemistry. And at that time, I kind of was looking at two routes, either looking to get a job or going to grad school. And so I didn't really have my stuff together, I would say, at the end of my bachelor's degree. But one of the things that someone had told me right before I left was, if you do a PhD, they pay you. And that's the one thing that stuck in my mind as I decided to go towards more of the job route. So I thought coming out of undergrad, I could get a job, easy peasy, no problem. And that wasn't exactly the case. I found a lot of them asked for experience, internships, or previous job experiences, which I didn't have yet. So I was having trouble getting a job. And so in this gap year that I took between my undergrad and getting into UConn, I ended up working kind of odd jobs that had nothing to do with science, really. So one was like a receptionist job. The other one was at Athleta, which I'll mention up again in a few slides. But one of the women that my mom works with, her husband is a research scientist at Yale, and he offered to give me an internship position for about 6 months. And that kind of sort of set the ball rolling for me. So it, one, verified that I liked doing research. And then two, that maybe grad school was an option. He really supported me in doing that. So he was one of the recommendations that I had. So then after doing my internship, which finished up November of 2015, I applied for grad school that year, and I got into UConn. And so at UConn, I started in 2016 there. I joined the MBB program, so the Molecular Biology and Biochemistry concentration. And I joined Chris Heinen's lab. So for those of you who don't know what Chris Heinen's lab does or isn't from UConn, we study DNA repair, specifically mismatch repair, and its role in one of the hereditary forms of colon cancer known as Lynch syndrome. So my whole sort of time at UConn for my thesis was looking at mismatch repairs having a direct selective advantage in human stem cells. And we also dabbled in like clonic organoids, which was fun. And so one of the things that I had started, well, one of the things that I was told was that in industry, papers don't matter, or publications don't matter as much as in academia when you're trying to get a postdoc or a faculty position. But that wasn't exactly the case for at least this job. They were very adamant, was I going to have a publication? And they were always asking, when was it coming out? Because I didn't have it when they actually hired me. But once I knew it was going to get accepted, it just hadn't been 100% accepted yet. But publications do matter in industry, at least for this position. So definitely try getting papers. They do count for something. All right, so my PhD was from 2016 and I finished last September, so September of 2022. And in that time, during my PhD, I actually got a job at Athleta, which I had technically I had it before my PhD. And that was something I did mainly because I wanted a second income, because as you guys know, you just don't get paid a lot in grad school. So I did work at Athleta. I really liked the atmosphere, their message, and their clothing. It's completely different than science, so it's more of like a release. So in that sense, it was good, and it was also helped me, which now I didn't know it was going to help me in this job, to be honest. But I'll get into sort of like more field application scientist role I've been playing, where you're very face-to-face with customers. And at this position in retail, you were very much face-to-face with customers, working one-on-one. So I'm having to use some of the skills that I had to use in that job at this job now. And then a few things that I think are good to get involved in and kind of boosts your resume and your CV is to have leadership roles throughout your PhD. And it could be in various ways. Doesn't have to be like a president or a vice president of an organization. Just being involved with one is sort of enough. Maybe you lead a project or lead an event. Those always look really good on your resumes. And definitely in industry, if you're going for a research scientist position, startup or a larger company, they want to see that you can lead something, lead a project, complete a project, lead a team, that sort of thing. So I was an MBB rep for 3 years. So basically a liaison between our government student organization and our department. And I was also part of YES, which stands for Young Explorers in Science. And that was for a few years. They do mostly panel discussions. I think right now, before COVID, we also went on-site to schools and did experiments with underserved youth. So it focuses mainly more on like urban sort of school settings, and students who might not have the opportunity to see a scientist or what a scientist might look like. So be active in programs. Don't just go to lab, do your science and leave. Try to find ways to be more involved. And then I also was a volunteer for Million Women Mentors, the Connecticut chapter. So if anyone wants to be involved in that, I can definitely get you involved in that one. That one operates at a much higher level than anything at UConn. Susan Beisowitz, who's part of the mayor's or the governor's office, not the mayor's office, the governor's office. I forget exactly what her role is, but she is sort of the liaison between the governor and this chapter. So it's definitely much higher up, works on a much greater scale, but that's a really great networking group to be a part of, because you have scientists from all over Connecticut and all over sort of job industries working together to be mentors for young girls, specifically more at the high school level, and sometimes college level. So that's a good place. If anyone's interested, I can get you contacts for that. And then I was also a business development intern for the nonprofit Dimension Scientists, or Dimension Sciences. And I've mainly focused on grant writing for that one. But it was really nice. That one, I have to say, was kind of interesting. It started right before COVID. And that gave me a lot of opportunities to see how a nonprofit is sort of built, because they just formed at that point. And actually the person who formed it was part of a tip company at 400. So that was kind of cool. If anyone has questions on those, I can go into further detail, but otherwise I will go to the next.
There's a few questions that are relevant to papers, I think. I can read them out loud for you. So the first is, did your publication matter because your thesis work was directly related to your current job?
That's a good question. So no. So my so they were more interested in seeing if I could lead a project from start to finish, and not necessarily what it was on. The only thing that I like technical skills wise, I took from my thesis to this job is cell culturing. That's probably the only thing that's similar, but otherwise the topic is completely irrelevant. So yeah, just the fact that you took a project from start to finish is what they want to see, because that's what they're in industry, that's what they want. They want you to take a project from, or this idea from basically nothing, and make it into something that they can then either help them produce a product or sell a product or get notoriety for money, essentially.
Okay, and then one more on the topic of papers. So someone says, I still have papers in the process of being submitted for publication, pending IP review. Is this something that is helpful in transitioning to biopharma right out of a PhD?
I would say definitely list it like on your CV that it's in process of possibly getting published. It definitely doesn't hurt. And I think if anything, it probably boosts your chances, especially if they interview two people and you're very similar, and that one person has maybe more because papers also, some people see papers as experience. So if they have more papers, more experience. So definitely list them. It definitely doesn't hurt. And if anything, it probably would help you boost you up a little bit.
And there's another one that came in, but I know you're about to touch on this, so I think you're good to go ahead for now.
Okay. All right. I can't see the top of the screen, but I think the next one's on job hunt. Let me see if I can get rid of this bar at the top or not. Hide floating. Oh, yes. Okay, perfect. All right. So the job hunt. So I started my job hunt about 6 months before I finished. But to be honest, I wasn't very serious about it. I really only started because my PI was very adamant I needed to start, because some jobs you might submit an application and it takes them 2 months to get back to you. You might have a few interview cycles to do, and then they offer you the job. So it can take a while. And he really wanted to make sure I had some place to go before I finished my PhD. So I kind of started, I should say, my about 6 months before. I had at least started thinking about it. And so some of the things that I'd started thinking about was what currently was an interest to me or to you. What do you want your day-to-day to look like? Does company size matter? Do you like something more on the smaller size, medium, large? Does location matter? Are you okay with moving away from where you're doing your PhD? Or do you want to move back home where family is if you're doing your PhD away? Salary. So I think a lot of people move away from academia. And one of the reasons is, at least for a postdoc, and at least for me, was salary was a big factor. Mine, and also, I mean, there's probably less jobs in academia. And then benefit packages. So benefit packages could be something like health insurance, dental insurance. Also, when I started looking, some of the companies, especially out west, like in California, also had things like they would give you a stipend for food, like lunch. They would give you a wellness stipend where you could use it on like gym memberships or massages or personal care. So some companies do offer more than just insurance. So that's something to keep in mind. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. I don't know why that wasn't working. A second thing is to tailor your cover letter and resume for the area you're interested in. So sometimes we don't like doing that because it takes extra work. You have to sort of change your resume or your cover letter every time you submit it to a different job. But it does pay off, I think, if you do tailor it to them and or highlight the skills that are particular for that job, not just all the skills you can do, but really the ones that they're looking for. I think is something you should do, because they only look at your resume for maybe a minute. So if you highlight the ones that they want, you're probably better at getting a second look. All right, and then look to see what's out there. So when I was looking, I did a lot of looking at LinkedIn, mainly because I had the app on my phone, and I found that I looked more regularly when I was on my phone. So LinkedIn was a big one. Later on, I had started, I also uploaded my resume to Indeed, and interestingly, I got more hits off of Indeed, like with like the job hunt scouter type people calling and asking if I was available or interested in X job that they had. Some journals have like a career page. I know Nature does for sure, and they'll list like everything from in the US to out of the country. So maybe you want to work in a different country. And they don't list just academia. They also have research industry jobs. And then networking. So networking there, if you're in the New England area, Boston has a bunch of sort of biohub networking events that you can just Google and search. And they'll meet up at like one of the breweries or bars type places, and they'll rent out a space and they'll have like a networking event there. So I did a couple of those before COVID, which I wasn't even job hunting then, but I was seeing what I might like to do. And then in New Haven, if you're in the Connecticut, New York area, I know also has some networking events by, I think the BioCT program has hosted a few. So those are sometimes good to check out just to talk to people and kind of feel out what you need to do to get a position that you're interested in. And then the last thing is you'll need recommendation letters. So you might want to start thinking when you start looking, like who would you ask for recommendations? usually one will be your PI, but who will be the other one? So I had to have 3 recommendations for this job. So I asked my PI, I asked the postdoc at that time, he's now an instructor, and then I asked someone from Dimension Sciences, who I was working with, and they only ended up calling 2 of the 3. So they didn't, so I shouldn't say recommendation letters, more people that they can call to verify that you are actually a good scientist. All right. So this is like for my job hunt experience, what I was looking for, and sort of the path that I took to get to this job. So when I was answering the question, what currently interested me, at the time, I actually didn't want to ever pick up a pipette again. I was kind of like in that burnout stage. I was looking for something that was either more like administrative or clinical. And one of the positions that I sort of landed on was this clinical variant scientist position. And it kind of related back to what my lab did for my PhD, which was Lynch Syndrome. And there's one grouping of people who have mutations in the mismatch repair genes, and it's unknown if those mutations are actually going to give them the disease. There's just not enough information on them. And so these clinical variant scientists get sort of the NGS sequences, and you have to decide, you basically have to read literature, come up with usually an answer based on literature, medical expertise, that sort of thing, if this person likely has the disease or not. And it might not be for Lynch syndrome, but it could be for whatever disease that company was looking into, any usually hereditary disease. It could be at the fetal stage, or it could be more at a more advanced, older adult stage. So that's what I was like gung-ho about. Obviously it's not where I ended up, but that's what I was sort of looking at getting into more. It was also remote, which I really liked, and it paid really well. So then the next question, what did I want my day-to-day look like? I was okay if it was remote. I liked the fact that if it was remote, I could probably construct my day how I wanted it. I could start at different times, I could end at different times, I could take breaks in the middle, more like a PhD at grad school, where in industry, like now I work 9 to 5, I'm expected to be here 9 to 5, and I typically cannot work from home. So that's something that you would have to consider. I do like a variety of things. I don't like doing the same thing every day. So that was something else I was looking at. Company size. For me, I like small companies, or medium size, something where like you get to know everybody, not just, your little tiny department, but you can know other people in other departments, and it's more like a tight-knit community and not this huge, massive like town type of thing going on. For me, I really want to stay in Connecticut. As I mentioned earlier, I coach basketball and my teams are here in Connecticut, so I'd want to stay with them until they graduated at least. For salary did matter to me. My goal was to make at least 100K starting out. And so that's what I was aiming for. And I was really only applying to jobs that I thought I could make that. And then benefit packages, which I touched on a little bit on the previous slide. To be honest, I had no idea what I was looking at for benefit packages, but I'll hit again on that later on. And I definitely have a different opinion on benefit packages because it wasn't necessarily on my radar, but yeah, it would be up there now if I was looking for another job. So for me, what ended up mattering the most was location, the company atmosphere, which I actually don't have listed there, and salary. So what I didn't necessarily matter as much to me in the end, as long as these 3 things were hit on. And then the last thing is apply and apply and apply some more. So when I was initially applying, I was applying to those clinical variant scientist positions. I probably applied to like 6, maybe 7. And I'll be honest, I didn't get a single call, nothing, zero, nada. And then honestly, I think it's because I didn't hit the qualifications that they needed at that time. I had no clinical experience. And a lot of them asked for clinical experience. And so what I kind of realized was I need to either get more clinical research experience or just industry, because a lot of them either ask for biotech industry experience or clinical. So I said, well, let me just try applying for a research scientist position. I knew that's what you're kind of trained for your PhD. So if I didn't get a hit on that, then my resume or my CV was not good. But thankfully, I applied to one research position, and that was this one. And it was the one that I ended up getting hired for. So yeah, so let's go on. All right, so these are skills that I took for my PhD, and I'm currently using them in the industry setting. And initially, before I got here, I probably would have been like, oh, technical skills. I need to know, cell culturing. I need to know how to do a Western blot. I need to know how to do PCR. I need to know how to run a gel, like all those kinds of things. But to be honest, those are important, but they'll also train you if you didn't know how to do any of those. And one thing at a startup is, at this startup, our machine wasn't out in the field yet. And so there was no way for me to know how to use the machine. So I had to get trained no matter what. So it's more of your soft skills that, or transferable skills that I think really matter most. So your ability, and they're all skills that you've learned in your PhD, you probably just don't really think of them as frequently. So your ability to make decisions and solve problems, that's something that we do every day as a grad student. Analyzing and interpreting data, not just analyzing and interpreting your own data, but also other people's data. And so when we do journal clubs, I know sometimes they're annoying and stuff, but that's interpreting other people's data. And that's something that really matters in the industry world. Presenting and communication skills. So when you present your data in your work in progress talks or journal clubs, those are really valuable things to learn. And I don't know if you guys have to take a public speaking course or not now, but would also be helpful. Ability to lead and manage a project independently. This is a big one because they expect you coming out of your PhD to be sort of, at least as a smaller company, probably a lead research scientist. And so you'll probably have a few people working underneath you, and you're going to have to be able to manage the project load for them and for you, and to get the project done in a timely fashion, because there are deadlines in industry. Self-motivation, something that you kind of have to have in grad school. A lot of times your PI is not standing over you, making sure you're coming in every day doing your work. Same thing with time management. In industry, time is money. So you kind of have to push things through quickly. Also, though, if it doesn't work, which is something that's different than academia. In academia, if something doesn't work, you're going to try to read some more to figure out why it's not working, try again. In industry, if it's not working, it's scrapped. On to the next thing. They don't got time to keep fiddling with it. They'll figure out something else. And then lastly, teamwork. So depends if you're in a small lab now as a grad student or not, but in industry, especially in a startup, I'll get into the startup in a second here, but we're super small. Everyone works together. Everyone's working on a little tiny part of, I shouldn't say little tiny, but a part of a project that's for a larger project or for our machine. And so we all have to work together, and we all have to get along and that sort of thing. So teamwork is a big thing too. All right, my job interview process. So for this startup, so one thing that I found about startup, and at least the startup, is the interview process is much quicker probably than at a larger company. So I found this research scientist position at Enrich on LinkedIn. And it actually told me to apply via email, which I thought was strange at first, to be honest, because most of them are apply through LinkedIn or a quick quick upload of your resume, but they wanted me to email it. And so I emailed it. And within 48 hours, they had called me and did like a quick screen interview on the phone. And then they set up an in-person interview for that following week. And so the next week I had an in-person interview. It was about 2.5 hours. And it consisted of a 45-minute presentation. And so this presentation, a lot of times, they might ask it to be something specific, either more related to what the company does, or it could be something that, like for me, had to do something with my thesis. So it depends on the company, but I did a 45-minute presentation. It was in front of the entire company. So there wasn't that many of us, so we can all fit in this conference room that I'm sitting in. And then I interviewed with the person who would be my boss. And it was very informal, which I liked. And I think that's one thing that I like about a startup, is that it's much more informal than a larger company. So it's much more like a discussion than him asking me question after question. I then got to interview with the entire R&D team, which was nice. So I got to kind of meet everybody. I could ask them more particular questions about the company, how they liked working here, what the day-to-day was like, that sort of thing. And then I got the tour of a lab space, and I met with the HR person at the end. So that was sort of and I only did one interview. So at a bigger company, you might have to do a few interviews, especially if there's a lot of people who apply. And then, so that was on a Wednesday, I remember. And then by Friday, he called me to give me the job. So within 2 weeks, so it was really quick. Within 2 weeks, I got a job offer, and I had actually not even close to being finished with writing my thesis. So I told them that they would have to wait a month before I could start. And they were okay with that. They said that they would hold the job position for me until that time. And so I quickly finished my thesis. I did my private defense, and I did my public defense, and then I started with them last September. So I graduated the last week in August, and I started the first week in September with them. So
there's two questions
Yep.
sort of relevant to your interview process. So the first is, how did you get your foot in the door in the terms of like this role? And I think maybe like how you formatted an email, since that's kind of like an interesting way of applying. Like, did you do anything specific?
So for the email, they just asked to send them my resume and CV, like a cover letter type thing. So that's what I sent them. I didn't say anything particular in the email. I just said, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm interested in this position. Here is my information. And they read it. So I gave them exactly what they asked for. And then I didn't know anybody at the company, so I can't particularly talk too much about like how I got my foot in the door for this position. I do think that so they called for the people that I sent for, they asked for like the recommendation people. I gave them my PI and then the postdoc, and that's the two people that they called. And he did say like my PI had great things to say, and he went on and on about that, and he had a great conversation with him. So I do think that played a large role in making them comfortable giving me the job offer, because they had confidence in his words about me. So definitely having good relationship with your PI definitely pays off. I would definitely say that. And in general, with other people in your lab, or with your committee members, if you're going to ask a committee member, if you can write them down, that would definitely helps. So yeah.
So thinking about your recommenders carefully is definitely a good one. And then there's one more question which is just, how different was the interview with your boss versus the R&D team?
So with my boss, he was very much more wanting to know sort of like how I would operate in the lab, like how would I go about organizing a project. He also asked me if our system would work on organoids, and I actually told him point blank, no, I don't think it would. I don't know if that helped me or not, but I was at least honest. I'm trying to think about what other questions he had asked me. I'm blanking right now, but if I think of them, I'll come back to it. But with the R&D team, it was much more like, what do you like to do in your free time? And what, like, I want to know, do they do things outside of lab together? Which they said that they do. And I'll talk about that. And then I want to know, like, were they talkative or were they very quiet, independent workers? Like, what were the lab dynamics? Because I was trying to get a read on if I would fit in. So with the R&D team, I was more trying to see, do I fit in with them? Will I fit in with them? Because yes, I'm interviewing to get the job, but I'm also interviewing them to see, do I like them? Because if I don't like them, then I'm not going to take the job, right? So that was one thing that was more of a focus when I was interviewing with the R&D team, where with my boss, I was trying to impress him, right? That's who you're trying to see if you, who probably will have the final say, which in my case, my boss is the CEO of the company, which is typical for a startup. You don't have a lot of uppers between you and the CEO. So yeah, so I was trying to impress him, and I was also trying to see, would I like him as a boss? But he was also very laid back. Like, he is very laid back. He wears Crocs every day. You can ask Rachel. So yeah, so I knew I would fit in because it was a very chill company. All right, so Enrich Biosystems. So they were founded in 2018. And they were actually in Massachusetts first, and then they were in Groton, and then they moved to Branford, which is where we are now. And so in Branford, there's this small little business complex that we're in, and there's probably 6 or 7 other startups, which is kind of nice to have a group. We're very small, so there's 13 employees. That's everybody, upper level, senior level people. That includes like the engineering team, the software team, all of the R&D people. So it's super small. And then I'm going to play a video in a minute just to show you guys what we do here. But essentially our machine, it's known as a Trovo. So it takes in vitro to in vivo. They took the tro part from in vitro and the vo part from in vivo and smashed them together to make Trovo. And this machine prints these microwells. So it's basically, think of a grid like system on a tissue culture plate. And I'll show it in this video in a second. And we can co-culture cells in these essentially little microenvironments. And we focus mainly on CAR Ts and tumor cells. Just something I had no experience with beforehand. I've never done suspension, and this is all suspension cell culture. So that was something I had to learn. And we basically get to look at the interactions, the killing, and the proliferation within these microenvironments. And then our machine can capture the microwells of interest, and these cells can then be harvested for downstream applications, which is sort of like the novel thing here. So here's a quick video. Hopefully it plays. All right, so that's our sort of platform in a nutshell. So you can see on the left side here, this is more of just still images. So these can be all found on our website. But this is sort of what you would get when after you image, it spits out these, we call them microwell movies. So where you can analyze the change over time. So the green are your tumor cells in these wells, and red are your T cells. And so these guys are killing, so you have a ton of T cells, and then these ones where you have a lot more green, the T cells probably didn't kill the tumor cells as well. And so we would go on to select the ones that do kill and then look for downstream analysis. All right, so my role as a lead research scientist. So my main role is mostly to oversee the progress and performance of other scientists in the lab. So I have an associate and an assistant scientist who work underneath me on projects currently. There's two other research scientists that are at my level. And one has another associate working under them, and then the other one doesn't have anybody yet. But we plan and conduct experiments. I give input and provide data analysis. So they'll probably come to me and ask for my opinion on this, and then we can go over the data. And I work very closely with my boss, so he usually is always coming in and checking to see what we do. I provide guidance and mentorship. So one of the girls that's under me, she's in grad school now getting her master's. And so she wanted my opinion and if she should do it and stuff like that. So I was able to sort of mentor her on that level, which is kind of nice. I'm a point person for collaborations a lot of times between us and other institutions or companies. So sometimes we might get CAR-Ts that people want us to screen. And I'm sort of the person for the project who will be the communicator between us and them. And we work very closely with the sales and marketing department, or at least I do, especially because it's a small company. So there's only one person in marketing sales. So we do work with them to sort of what needs to be in the videos, what needs to be on the website, that sort of thing. What should we be showing to our customers? And then I also write and edit manuscripts that we have in the works. And then last thing is we have to QC and validate our machines as they're being built. So we build everything on site here since we're a startup. The engineering and software team does that together. And then we have to test and QC, do they work? Can we put this out into the field? And then writing up protocols and making new protocols is something else that we do too. So this is just a week at a glance. So as I said, the workday is 9 to 5. I find this the most difficult thing after being in grad school where you can make your own schedule. But the day-to-day can really vary. Some days are packed, some days are slower. Today was a pretty slow day. But at the beginning of each week, we actually have a team lab meeting with the entire company since we're very small. And we each present, just like you would in grad school, we each present what we've done that week and what we plan to do that week. We'd only have so many machines because some are out in the field, some are here. So we kind of have to schedule our time on those machines. But this is like an example of what I would do if I was setting up like a cold culture with the T cells and cancer cells. So we'd go over the protocols and experimental details for that specific project, what ratios of cells we would probably make. We would print out those microwells that showed in the video. Usually that Monday, we will print everything for the whole week. And then Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll usually set up the experiment and plate the cells. We stain them with our antibodies so we can see them on our imaging software. And then we'll image that day. And then every day after that, we'll usually image for up to a week. We'll skip over the weekends. You don't have to work the weekends in industry at all, or typically at least. And if you do, then you can compensate yourself for another day during the week. And then capturing cells and harvesting cells are usually for downstream applications. It's usually about, depending on the project, but usually 7 to 10 days later. In between, so on like slow days, we might test out a new antibody or a new reagent or a new way of printing or size of microwell to see if that works. So we're always testing and sort of optimizing for things right now, especially at a startup level. And then writing up protocols, ordering reagents. So we have no like ordering team, you are your ordering team. So I order my own things, or if someone else under me needs something, then they might ask me to order something for them, that sort of thing. So these are sort of additional roles. So at a startup, there's not a lot of us, so you kind of have to have many hats. So I also have been helping out being a field application scientist as we started to go out into the field. So I've gone on site and done demos to train clients, provide support and guidance on their experiments, troubleshoot machines, either in person or remotely. And then I've also helped designing and packaging the kit layout for consumables. So I really like this aspect of a startup where I've gotten to, yes, I was hired as a research scientist, but I also got to sort of feel out, do I like being a field application scientist? Do I like traveling? Do I like the marketing area and designing of consumables or the kit, that sort of thing, more of a business side of the startup. So kind of get to test out a lot of things and learn a lot of things along the way too. And so this is just a week at a glance for what I would do for a field application scientist, at least with our company. So the demos are usually about 2 days. On the first day, we'll go and set up our Trovo machine. We'll QC and calibrate it for them to make sure nothing's changed. And then we don't do this, but for a more formal, maybe for a more a further along company than what we are, you might have a presentation to show them or a schedule that you're going to stick to before you start. But ours are pretty informal, so we jump right in. But we'll show them how to print microwells. We start to familiarize them with the machine. Similar to how you guys might teach a rotation student or an undergrad working under you. That's how you treat them when you're showing them how to do stuff. And then we'll test staining of their cells with our recommended antibodies and make sure that their cells look good, make sure everything's focused, software works, all that good stuff. Then we might break for lunch, usually during the staining, because you have to wait an hour. We'll get lunch then. And then we'll show them how to set up a cold culture and plate the cells onto the microwells. And then we'll show them how to image. And the second day, we kind of reinforce everything that we did on the first day. But we're usually done around like 3 p.m. Where on the first day, you could be there until like 6 or 7 p.m., depending on how long your client wants to be there. And everything is paid. If you do travel, everything is paid for by the company. Food. If you want to rent a car, you can rent a car, stay overnight, everything's paid for. And so these are just some things that I like, reasons why I like working for a startup. It's pretty fast paced. We've changed a lot from when I've been here, when I started to now, and I've only been here for a year. It's fairly easy actually to transition from academia to industry when you're working for a startup because it's a very laid back environment. There's more opportunities to explore your ideas similar to in academia and to also come up with different processes of doing things. Your voice is definitely heard. You're a name and not just a face. So at a larger company, you might know, the 5 people that you directly work with, but everybody else is going to be maybe like a wave in the hallway and you have no idea who they are otherwise. But here, everybody by name. We do things together, as you can see in these pictures. So I do like that sort of more community, family-oriented sort of vibe. Your voice has more impact. So as I said, my boss is one of the CEOs. So it's not like I'm going through 3 uppers before a decision is made about an idea. I have an idea, I go to him and I get an answer immediately. And sometimes it's good and sometimes he kind of is like, I don't know about that one. So you get an immediate response, and then if he likes it, it's immediately implemented. So that's kind of nice to have that impact. There's more learning opportunities, as I just mentioned. You get to wear multiple hats, and then you do get stock options at startups usually. They're different for different startups, but they do offer them usually. So the images, we do a lot of things together. We go to breweries together. This is a Halloween costume contest. We did laser tag. This is with one of the other startups in our business sort of building area. We do holiday parties. We've done birthday parties. We celebrate everybody's birthday every year, so that's fun. And then my last slide. Good, I'm on time. My last slide. So this is just sort of startup versus big company. This isn't like everything. This is sort of things that I've noticed between at least the startup I'm in and maybe a larger company. But startup, there's usually faster growth opportunities because there's less people here. So you can move up the ladder quicker, whereas a bigger company, you have more growth opportunities because there's more positions made, but it takes longer to get up higher, if that makes sense. At a startup, you get company perks. So meaning we do a bunch of activities and everything's usually paid for. So we'll go to breweries or happy hour, it's paid for. We'll have lunches, usually on a monthly basis, and it's paid for. We always have snacks in the kitchen, drinks in the kitchen, always provided. We do like the laser tag together. So we do a bunch of stuff together, which at a larger company, it's harder to do because you have a lot more people. You do have more responsibility simply because there's less of you. So more is on you to get done. There is some job insecurity because startups rely on usually venture capitalists to give them money and their product working. So I haven't found that here, but that is something at some startups. Startups can pay less. They just have less money because they're small. They just are starting. They're going to have less money. They haven't sold any products yet. It can be unpredictable. So if you're someone who likes a very rigid structure, then a big company might be better for you because it's pretty much the protocols are set in stone a lot of the times. Everything's been worked out. It's going to be very A, B, C, D kind of in that order, where in startups you might be A, B and A, B doesn't work. So now you're back. So now you've jumped to like D and F way down there, and then you're going to jump back. So it's kind of all over the place. You could be working on a project, put a lot of time into that project or setting up an experiment, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we should try this instead. And so you got to scrap it and start all over. So it's you got to be flexible. It's very informal, which is similar to academia, which I really like. Where at a larger company can be a lot more corporate and very formal. And at a startup, you have a lot of freedom, which is similar to academia in the sense you kind of you don't get to pick when you work, but you can pick sort of what your schedule is during that work day. Bigger company, get more resources, and the change takes longer. And then do I have, well, let me see if I have, oh, the other thing is, oh yeah, insurance benefits. As a startup company, insurance benefits are usually not good, which I did not know until I started here. Like health insurance, dental insurance, there's more people, the cheaper it is, the less people, the more expensive that insurance is. So the insurance, some of you might still be on your parents' insurance, so you haven't experienced this yet, but startup insurance, dental, health insurance, very expensive compared to probably larger companies. So yeah, so that's sort of what it's like being in a startup, how I jumped from academia to a startup. I think if you want to go into industry, going for a startup is a good idea. They didn't require me to have a postdoc, so that was nice. Where at corporate level, sometimes they do require a little bit more experience at the bigger companies. But yeah, I like the startup environment a lot, and I found that I fit in really well. So I'll take any other questions, Rachel, if people have them, or if people want to.
There's a question in the chat about, I think it's a good place to talk about it, is what is your work-life balance like? What has it been like in a startup environment?
So this might not be at every startup. I'm very strict sort of on my time. So I work 40 hours a week, 9 to 5. If I work more than one day, then I will leave early the next day. I do tell my boss, like, hey, I worked extra this day, I plan on leaving early, and he's never said no. So I take my time. My time here is I make it very considered valuable. So as soon as if I work more than 40, I will compensate myself either another week or somewhere in that time frame within the week. So yeah, so I'm very strict on how much time I spend here, because I think you can easily get lost and be here, until 6. And then they might start noticing you're here until 6 and ask you to do more. but make your time valuable. Don't let them sort of run you over, because you should want to be able to do stuff and do things other than just science.
And then there was a question about compensation and benefits between large and small, but it seems like you touched on that pretty well. And then just one last question that was submitted earlier that's more specific to like your business internship, I guess. It's how can you apply for business development internships and what do they need you to have?
So at UConn, they have a program, I want to say it was called Biomedical Entrepreneurship. It's put on by the business department and the grad school. I did take that course because I was thinking about going more into industry and I want to see job opportunities. So if you're thinking about going into industry or seeing how startups work, that class is really, really good. Actually, the main project was you had to come up with an idea and sort of implement it as if you're going to have a startup. But that class also allows you to network. So one of the homework assignments that I had was I had to call a CEO of a startup company and ask them why they start that company, how they start the company, what hurdles did they have to jump through, like all those things. And the person that I ended up calling for that was the one who started Dimension Sciences. And so she had asked me if I wanted to jump on. I had no idea it was going to be like a business internship type thing, but I just said, sure, I'll volunteer with you. I'll see what this is like. It was ended up being right when COVID started, so it kind of gave me something to do too. But that's kind of how that happened. But I would definitely look into that class if you're at UConn. If you're interested in industry or startup companies or even venture capitalist stuff, VC work, it was a really good class actually. I did like it, and it's at the Hartford Business School, so it's not actually on at UConn Health. And for those of you who are not at UConn Health, you can see if your business school has something similar to that too.
And there is, I know I want to be respectful of your time, but if you have a few minutes, there is a person in the audience with their hand up. So Hunter, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I'm considering industry and I was thinking about doing an industry postdoc because I heard those have come up a little bit more. Do you know anything about those and how those work?
I don't. So I do know people who have done postdocs in industry. It's not a bad place to start by any means. They're usually at
You're muted for some reason, Kirby.
yeah, I don't know why that happened. It just like spit me out. So yeah, so I think Alexion might have a program, BI might have one, Pfizer. So a lot of the bigger companies you would be looking at for the postdoc type industry positions. Although I can tell you when I went to a conference, there was one there. I forget what company she was with, and she said, honestly, it's just like a research scientist position, but you get paid less. So if you can kind of just go for that research scientist position, I would maybe recommend that if salary is something that matters, because she said you do pretty much the same thing as a research scientist would. You just have a different title.
Okay, and then oops, sorry. We have one question from an undergrad in the audience, so I want to make sure it's addressed if you can. I'm in my third semester and starting to think about research. With the limited knowledge I have, much of the work that's being done on campus is lost on me. I'm trying to figure out whether I should be prioritizing finding a research topic I'm interested in or just getting into research, generally speaking. Research is what I think I'd like to do, just not sure exactly what that will look like yet.
I'd probably recommend just get your foot into research in general. I wouldn't worry about the topic yet or anything like that, because a lot of the skills, like cell culturing, that's a really big thing that I found that a lot of labs use. And even in the industry is one of the technical skills I took with me. So just getting into some sort of internship that has to do with research or a summer job that has to do with research, I think would be probably a good first step. And then if you like it, then sort of look at maybe what topics you want.
And also I will add, as a grad student, and I know beyond, is picking a good advisor. So finding someone that you really like being around is super important.
Definitely agree with that.
Okay, that is all from our audience. So thank you so much, Kirby. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. And this hopefully will be posted to our website shortly for anyone that could not come. So as the thank yous pour in, Kirby, thank you again for your time.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, bye everybody.
Do I just leave?
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Kirby.
You're welcome.